Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Stay Frosty podcast with your host, Norm. Yeah. So, yeah, that's the intro right there. The intro is done. Done. Now, this time I have written some notes for myself. So I had some things to talk about, prepared to talk about, because as we all know by now, but if you're new to the podcast, I may as well mention it. This podcast is mainly it's revolving around TV shows, games, and books. hmm Books now. Um, I mean, books is random just because I have picked up reading a little bit. I read a little bit every now and again. I do read books. I'm quite a smart guy. Okay. Something's changed. Something's changed. Might well be move the sofa. Little smidge that way. Right. Yes, this is the Safe Frosty podcast, and today I'm going to be talking about the TV show called Rings of Power. I'm going to be talking about Frostpunk 2 and its performance on my PC, and we're going to be talking about old school RuneScape, because why the hell not? And I'll put in some smidgens of some other delightful stories here along the way. So yeah, buckle up, sit back, relax, and enjoy the next half an hour with your host, Norm. I hope that wink worked. It didn't work if you're only listening on audio. Uh, Warning to all the people listening on audio, I just did a wink to the camera, so you can have my wink audio. The audio version of my wink would be ding. Okay. Okay, right. So last week I took a couple of days off of annual leave, right? I took some days off leave. And not only did I have a great time just chilling out, relaxing out good, shooting some b-ball outside of school. Anyway, they get me carried away on that song. I decided to watch the whole of Rings of Power season one because um, I've heard mixed reviews on it. Really, some people love it, while other people seem to think it's complete trash. Now, I think the people who think it's complete trash are probably, without meaning to, comparing it to Lord of the Rings. Where I think if you're going to compare Rings of Power to Lord of the Rings, I think that's a mistake. And if you don't know, Rings of Power is a prequel TV show to the books Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. It's a prequel to all that. It's way back in time. It's like when the rings were made, when Sauron was coming to power, kind of. Um, so some people really dislike it. And I'm pretty sure they're probably comparing it to Lord of the Rings, or even the Silmarillion, the book, because probably Silmarillion is quite engaging and it probably makes a lot of sense in its own right. Now, I'm not saying Rings of Power doesn't make sense in its own right. It's just there are some little bits here and there where it does kind of feel a bit well, plot's holy in a way. And obviously, I don't want to spoil anything because I know you. Yeah, I know my listeners by now, and I know you don't like spoilers. So I'm not gonna ruin anything. Ruin anything. Now, some people love it, and I can kind of see why. Because, in my opinion, I think I like it. I'm in the middle ground here. Some bits I don't really like. Other bits, yeah, I think it's pretty good actually. So, for one, the action and the graphics are just they're pretty good actually. I was not a fan of the Hobbit graphics in the Hobbit films. I was not a fan of much in the Hobbit films, to be honest. I love Lord of the Rings, but Hobbit, because I thought, oh, there's just too much CGI going on. It's just lazy. It's just lazy. And I think Rings of Power does a great job of straddling the line. Yes, that is a word. straddling the line between graphics, CGI, and real props and makeup and costumes. I think it does a good job, and it almost harkens back to Lord of the Rings, really, for me. In terms of graphics and what you're seeing visually, I think it's totally, yeah, I'd say it's totally on the same level as Lord of the Rings. It's really good, really really good. And none of the props or the scenes or setting, none of that. None of that makes you think it's cheap. You don't think, oh, they've cheaped out here. Oh, I can see a backdrop, because that did happen when I was watching a TV show recently called Ghosts. I do really like Ghosts. It's very funny, but in a few scenes, I did notice that the backdrop, they're just on a set. They're on a set, and there's like a table and a green screen probably, and you can just see the green screen in the back, and it just, some scenes where the lighting is a bit off, you can kind of just tell that they're stood in front of a big cloth. It's really jarring for the experience, but it's still a really good show, and you should probably watch it especially if you're English from the UK, because the British humour in it is good. Now, getting back to Rings of Power, before I get too distracted, um, yeah, so I think that the action and the graphics are really good. Now, I think the things really which let it down for me is just a couple of plot holes here and there. And obviously, I don't really want to ruin it, but it's around episode 7 where it kind of happened for me, and I was just like, they haven't really thought this through, have they? They haven't really thought this through. But anyway, it doesn't, definitely doesn't take away from the whole experience. Um, Now, another good thing about it is I really enjoyed seeing characters or areas in the land kind of morph into what you see in the films, in like The Hobbit and in Lord of the Rings. You see them like morph from being something to something completely different. That's the spoiler-free version of how these places and people morph. But they transform into something, and you're like, wow, oh, it's there. Oh, they're there. Oh, it's that person. Oh, right. You know, because I was shocked by a few of them. It was really cool. It was really cool what they'd done there, because it might not have been completely accurate to the book, because I haven't read Silmarillion anyway, but perhaps there were details which weren't precise, but I'm sure there were details in some of the Lord of the Rings which wasn't precise. But did we give Lord of the Rings a hard time? No, because it's one of the most highly rated films trilogies of all time. Um, but I'm sure there's some things they got wrong in Lord of the Rings. Like, come on, there's if you have the extended edition of the Fellowship of the Ring, there's a bit at the beginning where a Hobbit just randomly picks up like a big kind of muffin and eats it, and it's just like, no, they didn't have cupcakes or muffins back then. Surely not. They were like the medieval times. There's no way they had cupcakes with like icing sugar and chocolate chips on top. I mean, I don't know what he actually ate. That was an example, but I can imagine. I can imagine that Hobbit did eat that. So I'm sure Lord of the Rings got things some things wrong. But do we give it a hard time? No, because there aren't that many plot holes for one, in my opinion. Um, Obviously there is the whole debate about whether they could have taken the Eagles in the first place, dropped the ring I've seen that YouTube video. So no, we'll skip over that one, because that's really that's a bit of a nuanced. It requires a bit of a nuanced answer, and I'm pretty sure it's something to do with how the Ravens couldn't do that. Like they weren't in the right. They didn't have enough power at the time, or something like that. I remember my brother tried to explain it to me, but I'm sure there's a good reason why the Ravens couldn't do that. Ravens? They're not Ravens. Eagles. Like the best NFL team in the NFL, best American football team in the NFL, one below the best, sorry, because the best one, the Vikings. Vikings are probably one of the goats of NFL. They're a goated team. Now Eagles, just a little bit worse, just a little bit. We'll knock them off top spot this season, I'm sure. Anyway, getting back to the Eagles, Lord of the Rings. Yeah. So Rings of Power. It's got graphics, it's got action. It's the general plot is pretty good, to be honest. I think it's pretty cool. And but there were some subplots which I didn't really care about. I don't think they really deserved as much screen time as they got, to be honest. Like honestly, Nori. There's this character called Nori and her friend and all her family. It felt so by the end of the season, by the end of this, yeah, by the end of season one, I felt like they didn't have to have that in. Like it just felt completely optional. They could have done something else, but that wasn't a spoiler at all because nothing happens to them. It just feels completely optional. They could have not had that in. I think they probably only included it because they're kind of like hobbits. They're not actually hobbits, but they're kind of like hobbits. And they're obviously hobbits are a big deal in this universe. And in Rings of no, in the Hobbit films, and in the Lord of the Rings, the hobbits play a very big role. So maybe that's why they wanted to include them in. They aren't hobbits though. That's the thing. They aren't hobbits. They're half feet, half fits, and I think that's right because if my memory serves me well, in the history of Lord of the Rings, their hobbits didn't come into existence until quite late on. Like humans, elves, dwarves, they've all been there for ages, but hobbits were relatively new from stand. Completely wrong about that. You might have to fact check me on that. And make sure to put it in the comments below because you're watching me on YouTube or Spotify, where you can still put it in the comments. Make sure to take advantage of that feature because I will be checking that. I will be looking and reading and responding to your comments. So we're about 10 minutes into the podcast now, guys. If you're enjoying this content, you want to see me make more. You know, if you want to support me in any way you can. The biggest thing, what I've noticed, guys, is that just under half of the people that watch and listen aren't subscribed to my podcast. They aren't subscribed to the Stay Frosty podcast. So, you know what would be awesome? Would be to get that number down to like 20% not subscribed and like 80% subscribed. You know the easiest way you can do that? You just click subscribe. Just click subscribe or follow on Spotify. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, and I think I did a good job there, good little sales pitch. I'm gonna move on rapidly now to Frostpunk 2 because I spoke about this briefly in my previous podcast. The previous episode, I spoke on 2. It's a new game. It's it's basically it claimed to be a city builder, but it is actually in reality it's more of like a grand strategy city builder, if anything, which isn't a bad thing at all. But the thing which really did trigger me when playing it was the fact the performance of it is not good. The optimization is just not there, and I wish there was some things which were better optimized because basically I upgraded my computer the other day mainly so I could play Frostpunk 2 better than previously. However, even with the upgrades and stuff, it still suffers with performance issues. It's a real shame because I can't even refund it now because I've gone past the 2 hour mark. And I can confirm for you guys that on Steam, they will not refund something when you've played it for longer than 2 hours. And it has to be in the past like month or something like. But I can confirm it's once you get over that 2 hour mark, they are not obliged to refund you the game, which is a real shame because I was giving it I was giving it a go. I was giving it a chance. I was giving it a real chance when I played. And I was thinking the graphics are really good, but you know, it's just not working very well. But I'm gonna keep going. I'll try my best. See if the performance really does tick me off. And it did. It successfully ticked me off. But too slow, too late. It got to me at about 4 hours in. 4 hours mark, like I cannot have. It's just stuttery, and it's not that bad to be honest. It's just when you're zooming in and out, it suffers bad. Like, I feel like the way they've done the whole zooming in and out thing is not good, and that I could describe a bit better for you guys because obviously you've never played the game, so you don't know what I mean by zooming in and out. So say you've got your city on the screen, right? You've got a screen on the screen. There's the city, and then you say you want to zoom out and see how you're doing in your other settlements. Instead of, I don't know, having tabs along the side of the screen where you can just double click them and go there, like they do have it in the game, by the way. You can also zoom out, so it like graphically zooms you out into like a world map view where you can then click on settlements. But for some reason, that it goes so slowly and stutters so much when you do that. So I feel like if they could give me an option of just to be able to turn that off, so that I can to get to the other settlements, I just double click them because I'm sure when I double click them instead of zooming out, I don't have any problems, right? And maybe there's the world map view for when you're sending out expeditions, right? Same for that. You don't have to zoom out for that. You could just double click the like the world map indicator or icon as that's in the game already. So it seems almost pointless having to zoom out as well as having the icons. It could be this. It could be the same experience, exactly the same experience, if you could just double click on the icons. To be honest, there's no reason for the zoom out thing to be in the game, and I'd be so sad for them if they spent loads of time on this zoom out feature because I have to say it's not doesn't add anything to the experience. It's unfortunately not. But I can talk about some good things about Frostpunk 2 because this is basically my review of Frostpunk 2. I've only played for 4 hours, but I've got a pretty good idea as to what the game's about. And what I like about it is it's like a city builder. Like imagine like Sim City, but you've also got kind of survival elements in there. So running out of oil or coal means that your city will start to die. Like they'll start to die of cold and stuff like that. And you've also got to deal with incoming of it. Like you've got a timeline on the screen, and you see when bad things are gonna eventually happen to you, and you think that's you've got to be prepared by making loads of food. So what I did was I had a few kind of food farms, let's say. I had a few farms and I didn't have enough to make enough food for this incoming event, which is called a whiteout. So I tactically turned off some of my other um, buildings and I put these farms I had into overdrive mode. So the workers were stressed because they were working longer hours, but we were getting more food as a civilization or yeah. Another thing I like about it is that it's kind of like Crusader Kings in a way. It's kind of like a grand strategy game because um, you've got to make decisions and pass laws. And the interesting thing about it though is that it's not all for just so saying Crusader Kings 2, all the decisions really are just for the good of your character, for the good of you, and there's only kind of one reason to do things. In Frostpunk 2, though, you've got loads of different types that look like groups of people. So you've got like the travelers, and you've got the people that have been there for ages, and you've got the merchants, let's say. But they all have different ideas of how you can make your city and your civilization better and stronger. So that's an interesting mechanic, and I really liked it. I think it's really cool. I haven't really seen that before in a game. I mean, I've seen some systems like in some ARPGs where you've got a renown kind of system where doing certain action, killing certain beasts or like completing certain tasks increases your renown with some cultures or whatever. I've seen that before, but this is actually in Frostpunk 2. It's actually impacting the game itself. Like you have to appease certain people, otherwise they'll get pissed off or not. and that affects certain parts of your town. I'm sure, maybe, yeah, or something like. I think some of them can cause like riots, and others can do other things like that. I mean, I would love it if that was 100% true, but I don't know. I didn't get that far, so I should probably go return to it. Hopefully, when there's some sort of update, or maybe I can find a mod where it improves the graphic stability, and then I will probably play it a lot. Um, so yeah, that is Frostpunk 2 for you guys. So we've talked about TV shows so far. We've talked about games, and normally I've just been kind of rambling on and on and on, like like a motorway. A motorway goes on and on and on. Like, I mean, of course, there's an end to the motorway, but um, you know the general idea with motorway. You get on the motorway and you just sit there and wait until your exit's up, and then yeah, that's it. That's motorway driving for you. It's probably the best type of driving. But you want to know an interesting thing, guys, about the motorway, and also I remembered it the other day, and I felt I have to share this story with someone before I forget, and it's going to be you guys. You're the lucky people that's going to hear this story because I have no one else to tell where it's relevant in the current context. Otherwise, it's going to seem like a random story out of nowhere, and it's like, okay, thanks. Why'd you tell me that? Because sometimes this happens to me, guys. I have this like conviction to tell someone something to get this thing off my chest. I have to say it. Um, and unfortunately, sometimes it seems so random that it's so awkward. So, right, getting back to the story, right? Okay. So I was leaving from work one day, and I came down onto the motorway from the slip road, and um, I saw this traffic officer in his van doing like an S shape across the motorway, but he was just a bit behind me, and there were actually no cars in front of me either. I got onto the motorway just as he started doing this. I could see him in my rearview mirror, like swerving across the whole motorway because he obviously wanted everyone to slow down. So he was doing that. I was thinking, oh, right, okay. And then a few minutes went on, and I realized I was the only car on the motorway, and it was so surreal. It was one of the most surreal experiences I have ever had. I've ever had. And I realized the other day that will probably never happen again to me ever. I don't think that will ever happen again. What are the chances that I was the only car to be in front of the traffic officer doing that? So that later on, like 2 minutes down the motorway, I was just on this absolutely empty stretch of motorway. Well, on the other side of the road, I could see loads of cars, but on my side, it was just me. I looked in my rearview mirror. I couldn't see a single car. Couldn't see a single car in front of me for like a mile, and it was so cool because I felt like it was. I felt like I was in like a survivalist movie. I felt like I was like in a post-apocalyptic moment where like the whole human race had just disintegrated, and it was just me and my Yaris fending off. There were no zombies, but I was like surviving by myself. It was so cool. And at the time, I was like, "This is so awesome because I am the only car here. I could literally swerve across all the lanes, and it wouldn't matter." But I didn't do that because I'm not crazy, and I'm sure if a policeman saw me do that on the motorway, he might want to have words with me. So I didn't do that, but I did enjoy that moment quite a lot, where it was just me on the motorway. It was so good. It was so. I've thought of it. I've thought of the next part of the podcast. I said earlier, right? I said earlier that I was going to cover the old school RuneScape. I tried to do it just now, and it felt very, very dull indeed. And I thought this is not good content for this podcast. So I guess you may have heard of a long-running game series. It's called Final Fantasy. Right? Final Fantasy. Now I have some plans to complete a fair amount of Final Fantasy games because I am actually a big fan. I'm a big fan of the Final Fantasy games. And you might think, well, that's because you're a weeb and you love anime. But actually, I would say these games aren't even about anime, right? These games aren't about anime. These games are legit stories legit love stories. They have great graphics in the cutscenes. They have really unique combat, which is which is different pretty much every single installment. They're pretty lengthy, so you get your good money's worth for them. You get your money's worth. Did I mention the stories are really captivating? They're very impressive. And, I'm just an all round lover of Final Fantasy. Now, it's a shame I haven't completed that many of them, but this is about to change. This year, next year, I will be completing some of them. And the first one on my list is Final Fantasy 15 or XV for you Roman numeral enjoyers out there. Now, the thing which makes Final Fantasy 15 special is that it's like a road trip, at least so far in the game. It's like a road trip with four dudes, and they take photos of each other automatically. You can review them at the end of each day, which is cool. You can do fishing. You drive around in your car. You go to different places, but combat is really sick. I do really enjoy the combat in it, and it is just fun so far. It is just fun. I remember seeing reviews about this. It was getting review bombed. This is the thing about most of the more recent Final Fantasy games. They get so much stick for not being Final Fantasy VII. If they're not as good or original as Final Fantasy VII, then they're trash. Well, I don't believe that, guys, because Final Fantasy 12, 13, 15, and maybe 16 instead. They might not be. They might not be Final Fantasy VII, but they still got loads of good things going for them. So I'm definitely on the I'm definitely on the side of ignore the reviews for Final Fantasy and just play them for what they are. Play them if there's a cool looking character, right? That's my opinion. If you see some screenshots, you see a character that looks really cool or like really hot or something, um, just go ahead and get it because it's good. It's gonna grab you. Now, why did I pick Final Fantasy 15? Because I upgraded my PC. I was going through a list of games where I had turned them off. I turned them off. I had stopped playing them because my PC couldn't handle the game. It couldn't handle graphics. So I went back through this list and I found Final Fantasy 15 was one of them. So then I saw it the other day, started playing it, and I'm having an absolute whale of a time. Now you might wonder how I managed to do all of this stuff in 1 week. Watch the whole of Rings of Power, read a book, which I haven't talked about that yet. We may well talk about that still. Frostpunk 2 and everything because I don't know. I don't know. I just have a lot of spare time. I think that's all it is. Now I do need to get in shape this winter because actually, ironically, right, me and fitness, get way more I get way more motivation to stay fit when the weather is shockingly bad. When it's really cold, really wet, it's really dark. I just feel like I'm doing something epic when I'm working out. But when it's all sunny and hot, I'm just thinking to myself, I'd rather just be lying down, cooling off. Like I don't want to go on a run when it's boiling hot. Actually, I don't mind it when it's dark. Yeah. So I think this winter I will crack down on my health, and I urge you guys to do the same because I had a GP annual review not long ago, and I was hearing some horror stories in that, not from my GP, but from the woman who was doing it with me. Like, yeah, hearing absolute horror stories of people who didn't look after themselves from simple things such as not brushing your teeth twice a day. Right? She said that there was a person she knew that forgot to brush their teeth or didn't brush their teeth for like a week, and they got an ulcer, and that led to loads and loads of appointments, and that really wore her down on her mental health. And then she had poor mental health, and then years later, she's better again. Now, maybe this was just a made up story to encourage me to brush my teeth, but still, if it was true, that's quite scary. That's quite scary because it's not hard to brush your teeth twice a day. In fact, it's probably one of the easier things on the to do list of the day. And also, guys, I may as well share this piece of wisdom with you. But having a to do list is probably one of the biggest game changers for me in terms of motivation and just everything. Because as you can see, guys, as you might see, because you see the background every week now. You see the background, no boxes. You know why? You know why there are no boxes like I had a to do list this week. I had a to do list, and the podcast was on there. Podcast was one of the to dos, but I love a to do list because you get to see exactly what you'll probably forget about some things. You put it on to do list, and you think, right, yeah, I need to do that. I need to do that and that, and also it doesn't escape you. It doesn't get away from you. There, you can think to yourself, well, I don't have to do it today. I could do it couple of days from now, or when I'm free, when I know I'm gonna be not gonna be tired from work or something. So that's just my little pearl of wisdom, guys. Is if you're lacking the motivation to do things, or you want to get something done, and you're struggling, put it on the to do list. Just put it there. It's free. And making a to do list on Notepad is free. Or what I prefer is to do it on Keep Notes on my phone, and you can turn on a thing called tick boxes on Keep Notes, and it's actually how I do my shopping weekly. I make a shopping list on Keep Notes, put them all on tick boxes. So every time I get something from in the shop, tick it up, and that's a good way of saving money as well, because you will tell yourself, no, I'm only going to buy stuff on my list. But the amount of times where you forget and you just go around going, oh yeah, I'll have that, yeah, I'll have that, I'll have that. And you get to the end of the shop and it's like 60 quid for a shop. You're like, it's unreasonable. So if you have a to do list, if you have a to do list, it's going to work wonders, guys. Now, I'm going to wrap this episode up. I'm sorry, guys, it wasn't particularly humorous this time around. It was a bit more of a standard podcast for me, a standard podcast. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and make sure to follow me on any socials I have linked in the description. And until next time, guys, you've been listening to an episode of the Stay Frosty podcast with your host Norm. Stay frosty.